You think every inch of this planet has been mapped, photographed, and turned into someone's travel blog. You're wrong. There are 13 islands on this Earth that civilization has quietly agreed to pretend don't exist. No tourist boats, no scheduled flights, no Google Street View. And if you somehow manage to set foot on one of them, you're either looking at a prison cell or you're not coming back at all. Stay with me because the last island on this list isn't just forbidden. It's the world's largest unguarded biological weapons depot, sitting in open air right now, with no fence, no guards, and anthrax spores leaking into the groundwater. And almost nobody is talking about it. Island 1, Surtsey, Iceland. Forget the Instagram waterfalls and the Northern Lights tours. South of Iceland's main coastline, there's a jagged black slab of land that looks like it was sketched in charcoal on a blue canvas. This is Surtsey, and it may be the only place on Earth with a literal planetary laboratory status. No tourists, no divers. You're not even allowed to fly over it at low altitude, because God forbid a speck of dust falls off a landing gear and contaminates what's happening down there. On November 14, 1963, Icelandic fishermen spotted smoke rising from the ocean and assumed a ship was on fire. There was no ship. The ocean was boiling. A volcano was rising from 130 meters below the surface. The eruption lasted nearly 4 years. Lava hardened, waves broke it apart, more fire poured out. When the smoke finally cleared, humanity had a gift, a brand new island. Scientists around the world held their breath. Because what they were looking at was life appearing on a dead planet in real time, 0 to something right in front of their eyes. Surtsey was declared a nature reserve of the highest category, a sterile petri dish in the middle of the Atlantic. The mission: observe how nature colonizes bare rock without any human interference whatsoever. The rules are stricter than a surgical theater. A tiny group of scientists is allowed to visit once a year. Every piece of clothing, footwear, and equipment is sterilized before landing. Pockets are checked for stray seeds, crumbs, or spores. Anything organic from the outside world could destroy a 50-year experiment in one afternoon. But here's where it gets uncomfortably human. A few years after the island formed, botanists doing their rounds froze in place. There, among the slowly advancing mosses and lichens growing proud and green, was a tomato plant. Impossible. Birds don't carry tomato seeds. The Atlantic wind doesn't either. The investigation took about 5 minutes. One of the scientists, during a previous expedition, had needed the bathroom. He didn't feel like walking back to base. He'd also eaten a sandwich with tomato for lunch. Human carelessness became fertilizer. The seed germinated. The response from the scientific community was swift and merciless. The tomato was pulled out, sealed in an airtight bag, and destroyed. The ground was dug up and treated with chemicals. A 50-year planetary experiment had nearly been undone by one lazy bathroom break. Island 2, Niihau, Hawaii. You think white sand beaches, luxury resorts, and tourists in flower shirts, but just 17 miles from the busy island of Kauai, there's a silhouette on the horizon. Green hills, palms, sand, looks inviting. It is not. This is Niihau, the Forbidden Island. No paved roads, no running water, no shops, no internet, no police because there's no crime, and nobody pays rent. Getting here is harder than getting into North Korea. At least with North Korea, you can technically book a tour. Niihau doesn't sell tickets, not for any price. In 1864, King Kamehameha V sold the island to a Scottish widow, Elizabeth Sinclair, for $10,000 in gold. But the king had one condition, almost sacred in nature. The new owners had to preserve Hawaiian culture and traditions, untouched, forever. The Sinclair Robinson family kept their word. They just did it radically. They dropped an iron curtain. 160 years later, Niihau is still privately owned by Elizabeth's descendants. Around 170 people live here. Pure-blooded Hawaiians living exactly as their ancestors did, hunting, fishing, collecting rare shells for traditional necklaces. This is the only place on Earth where Hawaiian is the primary spoken language and English is taught as a foreign one. No power grid. Solar panels only, and those are recent. No cars, people walk, cycle, or ride horses. In 1952, when a polio epidemic swept Hawaii, the owners locked the island down completely. No one in, no one out, nobody got sick. That one event convinced the Robinson family that isolation wasn't just tradition, it was protection. Even Mick Jagger couldn't get in. The Rolling Stones legend reportedly offered whatever it cost to fly in by helicopter. He got a quiet, firm no. The Robinson family's principles outlasted rock and roll. Island 3. Poveglia, Venice. Venice, canals, carnival masks, gondolas, romance. Every year, millions of tourists flood St. Mark's Square. But most of them have no idea that if you stand on the main embankment and look through binoculars toward the Lido, you can see a dark silhouette of a small island just a couple of kilometers away. Not one gondolier, not for triple the fare, will take you there. They cross themselves at the mention of it. This is Poveglia, officially one of the most terrifying places on Earth. During the Black Death, Venice was a trading port. Ships came from everywhere, and with them came plague. The city's response was brutal but pragmatic. Poveglia became a quarantine zone. Anyone showing the slightest symptoms was shipped there. One-way ticket. No exceptions. People died here by the thousands. When the burial grounds ran out, bodies were simply burned, massive pyres blazing day and night, casting a permanent glow across the lagoon. Historians estimate around 160,000 people died on this island. Locals believe the soil is 50% human ash. The earth here is reportedly dark, greasy, and an unnatural shade of grey. Fishermen still avoid the surrounding waters, afraid of pulling up not fish, but human bones, polished smooth by the current. You'd think after all that, the island would stay empty forever. In 1922, they opened a psychiatric hospital here. Built directly on the bones. Patients, people already struggling with shattered minds, almost immediately began reporting whispers, screams, and visions of burning figures rising from the ground. Doctors simply increased the medication and called it hallucinations. The hospital's chief physician became the villain of this story, obsessed with finding the physical root of madness. Hidden from the outside world, he turned monstrous. Without anesthesia or sanitary precautions, he drilled into skulls with hand tools, used chisels, attempting to physically fix the minds of his patients. The screams from his operating room reportedly echoed across the entire island, absorbed by the lagoon fog. The ending came suddenly. After years of torturing patients, the doctor himself began losing his mind. He claimed the ghosts of his victims were surrounding him. In a breakdown, he climbed the island's old bell tower and jumped. Witnesses later said the fall didn't kill him instantly, and that as he lay broken but alive on the ground below, a thick white mist rose from the earth and slowly suffocated him. The hospital closed in 1968. Abandoned since. Rusted beds. Medical instruments still on the floor. The Italian government has tried to auction the island off for luxury hotel development. Buyers were found. They fled after the first night. One story involves their daughter's face, 14 stitches. Island 4. Hashima, Japan. You've seen this place in a movie. In Skyfall, James Bond meets his villain in a dead, crumbling city in the middle of the ocean. Most viewers assumed it was an expensive set. It isn't. This is Hashima Island, 9 miles from Nagasaki. The Japanese call it Miyake-jima, Battleship Island. Look at it from a distance, and the name makes perfect sense. High-grey concrete walls and jagged rooftops make it look exactly like a massive warship drifting through the waves. Today, Hashima is the world's most famous ghost city, but 50 years ago, it was the most densely populated place on the planet. On a strip of rock just 480 meters long and 160 meters wide, 5,000 people lived. Tokyo looked like empty countryside by comparison. They were here for coal. Deep beneath the island, Mitsubishi had found an underwater coal seam rich enough to build an entire city on a rock. Japan's first reinforced concrete high-rises went up here. The island had schools, a hospital, a cinema, a swimming pool, shops, a cemetery. The one thing it did not have was a single tree. Every centimeter was concrete. In 1974, coal became unprofitable. Mitsubishi announced it was over and cut the water and power. What followed looked like a disaster evacuation. No time to pack. The island emptied in weeks. Residents left furniture, televisions, entire lives behind. If you entered these buildings today, illegal and genuinely life-threatening, you'd see frozen time. Dusty cups on tables, 1974 calendars still on the walls, open textbooks on school desks, deflated balls in the gymnasium. Nature is finishing the job. Typhoons every year, salt air eating through the reinforcement bars, balconies collapsing, stairwells falling under their own weight. Tourists are permitted, but only on a narrow designated path along one edge of the island. Step inside Battleship Island and the building above you can come down without warning. Island 5, North Brother Island, New York. New York City. The city that never sleeps, glass, steel, 8 million people. But sitting in the East River, between the Bronx and Rikers Island, there's a piece of land that looks like a post-apocalyptic film set, dense forest, and if you look through the tree line, the hollow eye sockets of collapsed buildings. This is North Brother Island, New York's rotting secret, off-limits for over 50 years. In the late 1800s, when New York was choking on epidemics, the city needed somewhere to put the sick. Riverside Hospital was built here, and for most New Yorkers, being sent to North Brother Island felt like a death sentence. Smallpox, typhoid, tuberculosis, leprosy. The ferries heading there were called death boats because the passengers rarely came back. The island's most famous resident was Mary Mallon, Typhoid Mary, the first known asymptomatic carrier of typhoid fever in America. She didn't get sick herself, but as a cook, she silently infected dozens of households. When authorities tried to stop her, she refused to believe she was dangerous. She was eventually quarantined here by force and spent nearly 30 years on this island until she died. In 1904, the steamship General Slocum caught fire just off the island's shore. Over 1,000 bodies, mostly women and children, washed onto the beach. Hospital staff became rescue workers and gravediggers at the same time. The hospital closed in 1963. Staff walked out, left everything: X-ray equipment, patient files, an entire library. Nature moved in with a vengeance. Ivy has swallowed the 3-story brick buildings whole. Trees grow through floors and rooftops. Hospital wards have become surrealist forests. Today, it's officially a bird sanctuary. The waters are patrolled by Coast Guard and NYPD boats. Approach by kayak and you'll be intercepted. You can hear the Bronx from the shore. You can see Manhattan, but you cannot go there. Island 6, Ramree Island, Myanmar. Imagine a tropical island that looks like ordinary jungle on the coast of Myanmar. Green, warm, quiet. But listen carefully, and what you'll hear isn't birdsong. It's something breathing slowly in the murky water. Something that has been waiting there since long before humans existed. This is Ramree Island, the only place in the Guinness World Records for the most horrifying entry ever made. Greatest disaster suffered by humans due to animals. Saltwater crocodiles, not the sleepy reptiles in documentaries, the largest living reptile on Earth, up to 23 feet long, the weight of a small car, the most powerful bite force of any animal alive. For them, a human isn't a threat. It's just slow, soft food that walks itself into the water. The massacre that made Ramree infamous happened in February 1945, near the end of World War II. British forces had cornered roughly 1,000 elite Japanese Imperial Army soldiers pinned against the shore. They were offered surrender. The Code of Bushido made that impossible. Their commanders gave the order: cross 16 kilometers of mangrove swamp under cover of darkness, reach their main forces on the other side. They believed the worst part would be the mud and the British. They were catastrophically wrong. The moment the sun went down, the swamp woke up. The smell of blood from wounded soldiers and the noise of 1,000 boots splashing through water was a dinner call for every crocodile in the area, and there were thousands of them. British naturalist Bruce Wright, watching from a nearby boat, later described what he heard as the most terrible sound a human being can experience. In pitch darkness, screaming mixed with the crack of breaking bones and the deep thuds of massive tails hitting water. Japanese rifles were useless in the mud. Jaws closed around legs and torsos. The crocodiles pulled them under, methodically, one by one. British troops on dry land listened in horror to the dying screams of enemies being eaten alive. By dawn, the screaming had stopped. Of the 1,000 soldiers who had entered that swamp, 20 came out. 980 disappeared into the water. Today, Ramree is technically open to visitors, but local guides refuse to take tourists into the mangroves. The saltwater crocodile population here remains enormous. They still lie in the murky water, motionless, indistinguishable from waterlogged logs. One step off solid ground into that mud could be the last one you take. Island 7, Snake Island, Brazil. 35 kilometers off the coast of São Paulo state, there's an island that locals call the Green Hell. On maps it's Ilha da Queimada Grande. The world calls it Snake Island. From the water it looks like an untouched paradise. Dense green rocky shores, blue ocean. The beauty is a trap. This is the only place on the planet where humans are not at the top of the food chain. The island is sealed as a biological reserve, not to protect nature from people, but to protect people from certain death. Ilha da Queimada Grande is overrun with golden lancehead pit vipers, found nowhere else on Earth. Isolated here thousands of years ago, when rising sea levels cut the island off from the mainland, they evolved without natural predators into perfect killing machines. Old scientific reports estimate 1 to 5 venomous snakes per square meter. You cannot take a step without being within striking distance. But the venom is where it gets truly horrible. Because there's no ground prey on the island, these snakes evolved to hunt migrating birds, and they need to act fast, or the bird flies away to die at sea. So the toxin is 5 times more potent than their mainland relatives. It causes rapid necrosis. The flesh around the bite begins to dissolve. That's followed by internal bleeding, kidney failure, and systemic collapse. Without antivenom, death is slow. The last lighthouse keeper's family tried to live here until the 1920s. One night, a window was left open. Snakes entered. The family ran for their boat. To reach it, they had to go through the path in the dark, in a panic, straight through the snakes. A supply ship arrived days later and found them dead on the path, just short of the dock, covered in bites. The lighthouse went automatic. The island went closed. Today, only permitted researchers accompanied by a doctor are allowed to visit, and they do not stay long. Island 8, North Sentinel Island, India. In the Bay of Bengal, there is an island that remains a blank on humanity's map. Not because we haven't tried, but because they won't let us. North Sentinel Island. Home to a tribe that has rejected all contact with the outside world for 60,000 years, direct descendants of the first humans to walk out of Africa, and they have remained in the Stone Age by choice. We know almost nothing about them, not their language, not their numbers, not their beliefs. Some researchers believe they don't even know how to make fire, only how to preserve embers from lightning strikes. What we do know, they want to be left alone. and they will kill to protect that right. After the 2004 tsunami, an Indian Coast Guard helicopter flew over the island to assess damage and drop supplies. A warrior sprinted from the tree line and shot arrows at it. In 2006, 2 Indian fishermen fell asleep drunk in their boat near the island's boundary. The anchor slipped. The current carried them ashore. Other fishermen shouted desperately, trying to wake them. By morning, the boat had beached. The Sentinelese killed both men with axes and buried them in shallow pits on the beach. When a helicopter approached to retrieve the bodies, it was met with a volley of arrows and driven off. Then came 2018. A 26-year-old American missionary named John Allen Cho had spent years preparing to bring Christianity to the island. He got vaccinated. He trained. He bribed fishermen to take him to the reef boundary, then paddled the rest of the way by kayak. His first approach ended with an arrow through the Bible he was holding. He retreated. He came back the next morning. He waded ashore, raised his hands and called out, "My name is John. I love you all, and Jesus loves you." Those were his last words. The fishermen, watching from a distance through binoculars, saw the islanders put a rope around his neck and drag his body into the forest. Indian police were completely stuck. No murder charge could be filed. The Sentinelese exist outside Indian jurisdiction. They are sovereign. Sending in a recovery team would have meant starting a war. A police boat approached the shore and found warriors standing in battle formation. The boat turned around and left. John Cho's body remains on the island. Island 9, Miyake-jima, Japan. Japan is associated with neon cities and cutting-edge technology. Miyake-jima is something else. Look at old photographs of weddings or school classes from this island. People in formal kimonos, kids in uniforms, all wearing gas masks. This isn't performance art. It's the only way to stay alive. Miyake-jima sits in the Izu archipelago, about 100 miles from Tokyo. At its center is Mount Oyama, a volcano that doesn't kill with fire and lava. Oyama kills invisibly. It constantly exhales sulfur dioxide, a toxic gas that, when mixed with moisture in your lungs, converts to sulfuric acid. In July 2000, the eruptions became severe enough that the Japanese government ordered a full evacuation of all 3,600 residents. For 5 years, the island was left to the gas and the birds. In 2005, the residents demanded to return. The government agreed under one condition. Every person on the island, man, woman, child, elderly, must carry a gas mask at all times. Around the clock, going to buy bread, going to school, going to sleep. You know where your mask is, always. The island is covered in sensors and loudspeakers. When wind shifts and a sulfur cloud drifts toward homes, sirens sound across the entire island. Everything stops. Farmers drop their tools, children stop playing, masks go on immediately, hesitate, and you're looking at severe chemical burns to your respiratory system and possible death. Tourists come, drawn by the extreme novelty. Souvenir shops sell gas masks in different colors and sizes, almost like beach accessories, but the humor fades the moment you step off the ferry. The first thing that hits you is the smell, rotten eggs, cutting straight through your clothes in minutes. The air tastes of metal. Around 2,500 people call this home. They've made peace with the sirens, with cars that rust 3 times faster than normal, with wearing a gas mask pouch on their belt every single day. Island 10, Bikini Atoll, Pacific. Most people know the word bikini as a swimsuit. Fewer know the swimsuit was named after this atoll because its designer said the reaction to seeing it would be like an atomic bomb going off. That's the darkest, most cynical marketing line in fashion history. Bikini Atoll looks like a desktop wallpaper, white sand, palm trees over turquoise water, absolute silence. This beauty kills. It is nuclear paradise, poisoned for 1,000 years. In 1946, US officials came to the Bikinian people and asked them to temporarily leave their home for the good of all mankind, they said. For the end of all wars. The islanders believed them and left. They didn't know their home was about to become the world's primary nuclear testing ground. Between 1946 and 1958, 23 nuclear devices were detonated here. The worst was Operation Castle Bravo, March 1, 1954. Scientists miscalculated. The explosion was 3 times more powerful than predicted. The fireball reached 4 miles across. Part of the island and coral reef simply evaporated, leaving a crater 2 kilometers wide. 15 megatons of force. 1,000 times more powerful than Hiroshima. Radioactive ash fell like dirty snow on neighboring inhabited islands. Children played in it, not knowing what it was. Today, Bikini remains among the most radioactive places on Earth, but the trap is invisible. The air is relatively clean. You can walk the beach, the danger is in the life around you. The soil and groundwater are saturated with cesium-137. The palms that grew back look healthy, but their coconuts are poison. The coconut crabs here, a delicacy everywhere else in the Pacific, are essentially radioactive waste in shell. Eat a local fruit, drink local water, and you've swallowed a reactor. In the 1970s, the US declared the island safe and brought some residents back. Within years, doctors found dangerously elevated radiation levels in the returning population. Women gave birth to children with severe abnormalities. Men died of cancer. A second evacuation followed. Bikini is uninhabited to this day. Scuba divers sometimes get permits to explore the lagoon, where the aircraft carrier USS Saratoga and the Japanese battleship Nagato sit on the bottom in the dark, enormous and radioactive, slowly dissolving. You can watch the sunset there. You just can't touch anything that grows. Island 11, Farallon Islands, California. On a clear day, standing on the California coast west of San Francisco, you can see jagged rock silhouettes jutting from the ocean. These are the Farallon Islands. Native tribes called them the Islands of the Dead, where the souls of the departed went. They had no idea how accurate that name would turn out to be. This is one of America's darkest secrets. A nuclear waste dump sitting 27 miles from a major city. Almost nobody talks about it. In the mid-20th century, when the nuclear arms race was accelerating, someone had to figure out where to put radioactive waste. The logic then was terrifyingly simple. The ocean is big. It can take it. There was even an unofficial military motto: the solution to pollution is dilution. Between 1946 and 1970, Navy barges made regular runs from the Bay Area and dumped their cargo near the Farallons. The documented numbers are staggering. More than 47,000 steel barrels filled with radioactive waste now sit on the ocean floor around these islands. And that's only what was officially recorded. The operation was conducted with catastrophic carelessness. Many barrels didn't sink right away, too much air inside. The military's solution? They shot them with rifles and machine guns, punching holes so the barrels would fill with water. Radioactive liquid poured directly into the ocean before the containers even reached the bottom. Now, decades later, the salt water has done its work. The steel has corroded. Nobody knows how much radiation has already entered the ecosystem. Nobody knows how much more is leaking. The barrels cannot be retrieved. The risk of rupturing them is too great. This is a time bomb that cannot be diffused. The cruel irony. These same waters are one of the most biologically active zones on the entire Pacific coast. The Farallons sit at the heart of what's called the Red Triangle, home to the highest concentration of great white sharks in the world. The ocean's apex predators, circling in the darkness among rusting barrels that glow with invisible death. The islands are completely closed to the public. The official reason, protecting seabird nesting grounds. The real reason lies 400 feet below the surface. Island 12, Gruinard Island, Scotland. Scotland. Misty mountains, deep lochs, ancient castles. In the scenic bay of Gruinard, just a mile from the mainland coast, there's a small green oval island that looks like the perfect spot for a walk. Local people stared at it with quiet dread for decades. On government maps, it was marked in red, biological hazard. This is Gruinard Island. Britain deliberately poisoned it to learn how to poison others. In 1942, British intelligence developed Operation Vegetarian, a plan to drop cattle feed laced with anthrax spores over German farmland. Livestock would eat the feed, get infected, the meat would reach the human population, and an epidemic would follow, one capable of killing millions. But first, it had to be tested. The military purchased Gruinard, brought in 80 sheep, staked them at various points across the island, and detonated a bomb overhead. A brown cloud settled slowly over the grass and the animals. That cloud contained strain volume 14578, a particularly aggressive form of anthrax. The sheep began dying within 3 days. Scientists in full hazmat suits collected carcasses, dumped them into a ravine, and blew the rock face over them to bury the evidence. But they had badly underestimated what anthrax does. Anthrax spores don't die. They can lie dormant in soil for decades, surviving cold, heat, and time, waiting for a new host. When the war ended, the military realized they had made a catastrophic error. The island was so thoroughly contaminated that simply walking on the grass was potentially fatal. Gruinard was fenced with barbed wire and skull and crossbones warning signs. For 48 years, a dead zone. Change only came in the 1980s, forced by eco-terrorists. A group calling itself the Dark Harvest Commandos broke onto the island, collected a bucket of contaminated soil, and left it at the gates of a mainland military base with a note, "Clean up the island or we'll spread this soil across British cities." It was blackmail. It worked. In 1986, the government launched the largest decontamination operation in British history. 280 tons of formaldehyde solution were poured across the entire island. The most contaminated topsoil was physically removed. In 1990, the Secretary of State for Defense visited in person, removed the hazard sign, and declared Gruinard clean. A new flock of sheep was released. They survived. Technically, you can visit today. Not many people do. Island 13, Vozrozhdeniya Island, Aral Sea. This is where the jokes about crocodiles and snakes end. Every island before this one had a local threat, a contained horror. This last one is different in kind. What we're talking about here is a civilizational scale threat. Welcome to Vozrozhdeniya Island, translated from Russian Renaissance Island. The name couldn't be more bitterly ironic. It sits where the Aral Sea used to be, now split between Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. It officially did not appear on Soviet maps. During the Cold War, this was one of the most classified military installations on the planet. Around 1,500 people lived here, the Soviet Union's top microbiologists, military personnel, and their families. They had schools, parks, even discotheques. And just a few kilometers from the residential zone, behind multiple rings of razor wire, sat the world's largest open-air biological weapons testing facility. They tested humanity's worst nightmares here: bubonic plague, tularemia, brucellosis, smallpox, typhus. But their masterpiece was anthrax strain 836, not just a disease, a weaponized biological agent, genetically engineered to bypass every known vaccine and antibiotic, a true doomsday weapon capable of depopulating entire cities within days. Then the Soviet Union began to fall apart. In 1988, under pressure from the West, Moscow ordered emergency disposal of the weapons stockpiles. This wasn't controlled decommissioning. It was a panicked cover-up. Hundreds of tons of weaponized anthrax spores were loaded into stainless steel containers, doused with bleach, and buried in the sandy soil of the island. The thinking: the bleach will kill everything, the sea will hide the secret. Problem solved. They were wrong on both counts. First, anthrax spores are extraordinarily resilient. The bleach weakened them. It did not kill them. Second, something nobody had fully accounted for: the Aral Sea was shrinking fast. The water retreated, and the island that was once surrounded by water on all sides slowly connected to the mainland. The natural barrier protecting the world from what was buried there simply stopped existing. Vozrozhdeniya is no longer an island, it's a peninsula. Anyone can walk there, and they do. Jackals, foxes, rodents, and saiga antelope roam freely across the former testing grounds, digging burrows directly into the old burial sites, tearing through corroded containers. Scrap metal scavengers enter contaminated laboratory buildings and cut copper pipes, walking home with whatever is on the soles of their boots and in their lungs. In 2002, a team of American biodefense specialists visited to assess the burial sites. They were horrified. Of 11 burial grounds inspected, 6 contained active, living anthrax spores. The containers had failed. The contamination was leaching into groundwater. Wind was carrying infected dust across the dried seabed. This is the world's largest unguarded biological weapons depot. In open air, unmonitored, unprotected. Scientists have said it plainly. It takes one infected rodent reaching the mainland, one scavenger who opens the wrong container. That's the trigger, a chain reaction. A new pandemic, but this time one engineered to defeat every vaccine and antibiotic we have. This isn't a legend. This isn't a horror story someone made up. This is a real location, on a real map, and the people who know about it are choosing their words very carefully or choosing not to say anything at all. The island that named itself Renaissance is out there right now, sitting under the open sky, unguarded, waiting. And we are simply hoping nothing crawls out.